For the first time in almost 10 years, the future of Destiny is actually in doubt. And many might say that, the game has been here before, but over the years, it truly felt like the game just refused to die. Year after year, it always seemed like the next expansion was a make or break moment, and like clockwork, the player numbers would bounce back as a seemingly resilient core of players would not stop playing the game. However, recent news is causing players to question if we are looking at the beginning of the end of Destiny. Hearing that Destiny 3 was never actually even a thing and they were instead planning on a Destiny spin-off game was certainly a surprise to a lot of us. And finding out that that spin-off game was canceled, along with a genuine lack of confidence at Bungie in making a Destiny sequel, well, it really paints a dim picture for the future of the game. It would also seem that the majority of the staff have been moved to Marathon if they weren't one of the unlucky ones who got laid off. And in the midst of all of this, major leadership is no longer at the company. Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy, I think, are the most notable names to have left, with maybe even more to follow. But according to one of my sources, Herman Hulst sent an internal email to PlayStation that seems to indicate Destiny is far from dead. So PlayStation may think differently about the future of the franchise. And in light of all of that, I see a handful of ways that Destiny could be saved, and I would love to know what you think. We're going to walk through them, because every weekday here at Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then we go to a live stream where I want to hear what you think. So, if you like this content, hit like and subscribe. The first way I could see Bungie and Sony saving Destiny is what I call the nuke the site from orbit approach. And this really gets at the heart of one of Destiny 2's major problems. New or returning players facing an onslaught of changes or updates that they just either don't understand or they have no reference for. But this also gets at another core issue that any game like D2 is dealing with, and that is franchise fatigue. This is why new live service games always get a ton of initial praise, right? The new car smell is intoxicating, and nuking the site from orbit in Destiny would look a certain way. Basically, it would be sort of an entire game reset, and I'm sure there are plenty of lore loopholes that could get you there, but essentially, you would reset everything. Loot tables, light levels, I mean everything, and yes, it would probably upset a lot of people, but drastic times call for drastic measures. Every live service loot-based game faces this problem. Everybody wants to hold on to their precious loot, but they also want new and compelling reasons to chase new loot. They simply cannot go on forever. Everything does start to fold in on itself, and if the current structure is to basically just give less substantive content and slowly lose players anyway, well, why not rip off the band-aid and see if you could create a resurgence and even some momentum? Now, like all plans, this one would face some challenges. First and foremost being that as long as the game Destiny 2 is out there with that D2 name attached to it, new players would potentially stay away. It's sort of a stigmatized thing at this point. It's like, well, Destiny 2's been out for such a long time, I'm not diving in to an existing game. It would also face the challenge of returning players feeling like this is sort of a half measure. It's not Destiny 3, it's not a brand new game, it's just Destiny 2 with all of your stuff reset. So this plan is not likely to happen. I really don't think that you would see them do this. It would be a pretty big gamble, but I do think this is one of the options. This is something that they could try, because stranger things have happened, and sometimes the plan is just so crazy that it just might work. Speaking of which, let's talk about another crazy plan that Sony may find more appealing. For the longest time, fans of Destiny have talked about how much they would enjoy a Destiny 1 remake. Some even consider The Taken King to be the moment the Destiny franchise was saved, followed by Rise of Iron and the Age of Triumph being the golden age of Destiny 1. And we certainly know that PlayStation is a fan of remakes. The TLU 1 remake did well, the Demon's Souls remake got a lot of praise, The Last of Us 2 remaster did very well commercially, and there are rumors about a Horizon Zero Dawn remaster. Well, why not take one of the most iconic looter shooters and go back and remake it? This could serve a very similar purpose to Destiny 2 with the nuke the site from orbit strategy that I talked about. Basically, a huge reset that hits two big goals. You would get new players and rejuvenate your returning player base as well. Done properly, you may even be able to walk the remake all the way up to Destiny 2. It could be an opportunity to also explore a new engine. Maybe one that's a little bit more agile and less cumbersome and slow and restrictive. The Tiger engine is certainly good, and you wouldn't want to lose that Destiny feel, but over the years it's been very clear it is a difficult engine to expand the game within, and it's slow on turnaround time for updates and changes. The creativity and the talent of Bungie being set loose in a less rigid engine could truly be amazing. I also think this could help with the whole issue of a name reset. Many have indicated that they just wouldn't ever want to get into Destiny 2, saying that a sequel would likely be an easier time for them to jump in. Well, what better way to get folks to check out Destiny than starting all the way over with a great-looking next-gen Destiny 1 remake? And PlayStation may like this for another reason. This could also be a pretty big leadership reset, and it could be essentially a do-over for the entire Destiny franchise. All those lessons learned, all that institutional knowledge about Destiny and about live service, they could, at some level, build the next big looter shooter by starting over. With all of those things considered, could that also then lead PlayStation to push for something currently thought to never be happening in the future? The fact of the matter is that Bungie was not building Destiny 3, even though it's easier to say, hey, Destiny 3 was canceled because that's what everybody assumed was happening. But the truth is more complex and potentially something PlayStation will see differently than Bungie. After 10 years of ups and downs, Sony could see the Destiny IP as just too valuable to do little spin-offs or small projects like Bungie was planning. According to sources, they were going to do a smaller PvP game and then the spin-off third-person game. But a properly funded third game could make sense given PlayStation's history and how they treat their franchises, especially if Marathon doesn't hit as strong as Bungie hopes. The internal reports from employees was that they were worrying about Destiny's audiences trending older, and they were really wanting to get younger gamers with Marathon. Now, I personally have a lot of doubt about a hero extraction shooter getting traction with a sizable audience, especially a younger audience. I really don't think Marathon's going to hit the heights and the success that we saw with Destiny over the last 10 years, which, if that's where things end up, Herman Hulst and the board may see a lot more value in using the Destiny IP instead of putting everything on Marathon. It's really hard to see 850 employees at Bungie working primarily on the Marathon title. We've seen so many live service games that thought, hey, this game mode's going to really last and could be its own game. We've seen that shelved entirely with Naughty Dog and The Division, and some games have just come out and flat out failed at this attempt. So putting a lot of eggs in the Marathon basket could end up pushing bandwidth and funding back to Destiny, because I just keep coming back to the idea that the IP is just too valuable to abandon altogether, which brings me to the last potential path forward for Destiny. Up until just last week, it really looked like the plan was to put Destiny 2 into coast mode while they worked on and launched Marathon, and then eventually they would release Destiny 3. But we could have been closer to the truth than we actually realized, and this reality is not really a way to save Destiny, but it's a way to give it its best shot at making the company money to fund and pivot to other things or games. Basically, I call this the coast until fumes plan. Essentially, this would mean less and less of the studio would be working on content for Destiny 2, and the current plan seemed to indicate that's already been put in motion. But long term, it would basically look like every year you would get a little bit thinner and thinner in the content offering. Every piece of content would get less and less money from the consumers as well. And eventually, the game would just run on fumes. You wouldn't be putting anything new, no major updates, and maybe minor patches here or there. And when this happens, the player base would just slowly dwindle into nothing. And honestly, this is a very real possibility for the game. If Bungie themselves weren't confident in a sequel, and they're largely signaling that they would like to move on from Destiny with their choices and their allocation for Marathon as well as smaller projects, that might be a hard sell for PlayStation to ask them to, hey, we want you to keep going with Destiny. They've been here before, and certainly other games have proven that if the developer developers don't want to build or make the game, it's probably best not to force them. So, given all these choices, what do I think is actually going to happen? Some of this actually depends on just how much PlayStation has control of the studio right now. Jeff Grubb indicated that Herman Hulst is in charge and that the plan is to take over, and that's basically happening. And if I'm honest, the internal Herman Hulst email very much read like, hey, we are going to fix this. There was a pretty good amount of ownership language in the email, and it really reinforced something that I believe about how PlayStation views Bungie. I think they want the talent more than the IP. And part of me is torn on this. I feel I'm almost disagreeing with my own thoughts, and I'm sort of internally debating this, but I really could see a future where PlayStation spins up a lot of smaller studios and smaller projects, given how much praise they have for the talent at Bungie. Just their reaction to the recent layoffs, I think, shows this, and Hiroki Totoki's previous comments also indicates how much they think and value the talent at Bungie. So after 10 years, I certainly think there could be a handful of ways to save Destiny, but from PlayStation's perspective, this could be the beginning of the end. But those are just my thoughts, and now it's time to hear your thoughts. You can do that in a comment below or come to the live stream. It'll hit a card right here, as well as be in a pinned comment below. And if you like this content and you want more like it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.